Have you ever seen something you couldn't explain? Something that defied logic? Something impossible? This is the story of a place that existed, then didn't. A place where time itself seemed to bend, then break. This is the story of the Café That Vanished Overnight. Our story takes us to a desolate stretch of highway. Miles of asphalt baking under the unforgiving sun. A lone traveler weary from the road stumbles upon a beacon of hope, a charming roadside cafe seemingly out of nowhere. He steps inside, greeted by the friendly smiles of the staff and the tantalizing aroma of freshly brewed coffee. But this pit stop, this haven for weary travelers, holds a dark secret. One that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about reality. The sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the barren landscape. Our traveler, a man named David, gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white with fatigue. He had been driving for hours, the monotony of the road broken only by the occasional tumbleweed. He glanced at his fuel gauge, a knot of worry forming in his stomach, almost on empty. Just as his hope began to dwindle, a faint glow appeared in the distance, a beacon in the gathering darkness. As David pulled into the parking lot, he felt a wave of relief wash over him. The cafe, a cozy-looking diner with a weathered wooden facade, seemed to radiate warmth and welcome. He stepped out of his truck, stretching his stiff muscles and taking a deep breath of the cool desert air. The scent of pine and sage hung heavy in the air, a welcome change from the dusty monotony of the road. A soft jingle announced his arrival as he pushed open the door to the cafe. The warmth of the interior enveloped him like a comforting hug. The diner was surprisingly lively for a place so far off the beaten path. A handful of patrons occupied the booths, their conversations a low murmur against the soft music playing on the jukebox. "Welcome in, hun! Sit yourself anywhere you like!" a cheerful voice called out. David turned to see a middle-aged waitress, her face creased with a warm smile, gesturing him towards the counter. He gratefully sank onto a stool, feeling the tension drain from his shoulders as he took in the comforting aroma of coffee and fried food that permeated the air. "What can I get for you, dear?" the waitress asked, placing a menu in front of him. David glanced at the menu, but his stomach had already made up its mind. "Coffee and apple pie, please," he said, his gaze drawn to the easy camaraderie between the waitress and the other patrons. Their laughter, genuine and unguarded, filled the diner, creating an atmosphere that was both welcoming and strangely comforting. As David savored the hot, sweet coffee and the delicious homemade apple pie, he felt a sense of calm wash over him. The fatigue of the road, the loneliness of his journey, seemed to fade into the background. He found himself drawn into conversation with the friendly waitress, who told him stories about the diner, the locals, and life on this quiet stretch of highway. Time seemed to melt away as he listened to her stories, each one a thread woven into the rich tapestry of the diner's history. It was only when David glanced at his watch that he realized how late it had gotten. He thanked the waitress for the company and the incredible food, feeling a pang of regret at having to leave. The next morning, David woke to the soft glow of dawn breaking over the desert. The memory of the cozy diner and the friendly waitress lingered in his mind. He decided to stop by for breakfast, eager to savor another slice of that incredible apple pie, and thank the waitress for her hospitality. He wanted to tell her about the dream he had, a dream filled with warmth and laughter, a dream that felt strangely real. As he drove, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled napkin. He had jotted down the name of the diner, the Crossroads Diner, just in case he passed that way again. Humming along to the radio, he felt a sense of anticipation, a warmth that spread through him like a shot of good whiskey. He was going back to that diner, back to that feeling of belonging, even if it was just for a fleeting moment. The miles ticked by, the sun climbed higher in the sky, but something felt wrong. The landscape, once familiar, now seemed alien, the air thick with an unsettling silence. He checked the napkin again, his heart sinking like a stone in his gut. He had written down the name of the diner, he was sure of it. He was on the right road, he could feel it in his bones. So where was it? He slowed the truck, his eyes scanning the roadside desperately. The once welcoming diner was gone, vanished without a trace. He pulled over to the side of the road, a cold shiver running down his spine despite the heat. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of his own ragged breathing. He stepped out of the truck, his boots crunching on the gravel. He walked slowly towards the spot where he remembered the diner being, his heart pounding in his chest. But there was nothing there. No diner, no sign, no trace that anything had ever stood on that spot. Just an empty lot, overgrown with weeds and littered with debris. He ran a hand through his hair, his mind reeling. Had he imagined the whole thing? Had the fatigue, the loneliness of the road, played tricks on his mind? No, he thought, shaking his head. The memory was too vivid, too real. The warmth of the coffee, the taste of the apple pie, the sound of the waitress's laughter, they were all burned into his memory. He noticed an old gas station a few hundred yards down the road. Maybe they knew something, maybe they could explain what had happened to the Crossroads diner. He pushed open the door, a bell jingling overhead. An old man sat behind the counter, his face hidden behind a newspaper. "Excuse me?" David began, his voice trembling slightly. "I'm looking for a diner. The Crossroads diner? It was somewhere around here." The old man slowly lowered his newspaper, his eyes, dark and fathomless, fixed on David. A strange expression crossed his face, a mixture of pity and something else, something David couldn't quite place. The old man remained silent for a moment, his gaze fixed on David with an intensity that sent a shiver down his spine. He finally spoke, his voice raspy with age. "The Crossroads diner, you say? That's just an old ghost story, son." "Ghost story?" David echoed, his brow furrowing. "But I was just there, last night. I had coffee, apple pie." He trailed off, his words sounding hollow even to his own ears. The old man pushed a faded photo album across the counter, its worn leather cover cold beneath David's touch. Inside, images flickered to life, black and white photographs of a bustling diner, filled with laughter and the warmth of human connection. It was the Crossroads diner, there was no mistaking it. "This here was taken back in '78, the old man said, his voice barely a whisper. He pointed a gnarled finger at a younger version of himself, standing proudly beside the diner's entrance. "Best damn pie in the state we had back then." A shadow fell over the old man's face, the lightheartedness vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. He turned the page, his finger lingering on a photo of a woman with kind eyes and a warm smile. The waitress from David's memory. The next page held a stark contrast, a newspaper clipping, its edges brown and brittle with time. The headline screamed in bold black letters, "Fire claims local diner, no survivors." Below it, a picture of the Crossroads diner, engulfed in flames, the night sky choked with thick black smoke. David's breath hitched in his throat, his blood turning to ice. He remembered the warmth of the diner, the faint scent of wood smoke clinging to the air, a scent he had attributed to a fireplace. Now he realized, with a sickening certainty, the true source of that smell. The old man closed the album, his eyes locking onto David's. "There hasn't been a diner on that lot for over 40 years, son," he said, his voice heavy with a lifetime of sorrow. "Just an empty lot, haunted by memories and what-ifs." David stumbled back from the counter, his mind a whirlwind of confusion and disbelief. He had seen the diner, felt its warmth, tasted its food. He had spoken with the waitress, heard her laughter echoing in his ears. "But I was there," he stammered, his voice trembling. "I spoke to her, to the waitress." He reached out, as if to grab hold of the memory before it slipped away. The image of the friendly waitress, her kind eyes, the way she had refilled his coffee without him even asking. The old man let out a long, weary sigh, his eyes filled with a mixture of pity and something akin to understanding. "They say that sometimes," he said, his voice barely audible above the mournful whine of the desert wind, "the lost souls, They like to relive their last moments, searching for something they can never find. David glanced around the gas station, its dusty shelves and faded posters suddenly feeling oppressive, suffocating. Was he going mad? Was this some elaborate prank? But who would go to such lengths, and for what purpose? He reached into his pocket, his fingers closing around the crumpled napkin. He unfolded it carefully, his heart pounding in his chest. The name of the diner, the Crossroads Diner, stared back at him in his own handwriting. He thrust the napkin towards the old man, a desperate plea for confirmation, for reassurance, for anything that would make sense of this impossible situation. The old man's eyes widened, his gaze fixed on the napkin as if it were a venomous snake. "That's," the old man began, his voice choked with a terror that sent a chill down David's spine. "That's her handwriting. The waitress. Her name was Sarah." David stared at the napkin, the ink seeming to swirl and shift before his eyes. The gas station, once a haven of sorts, now felt like a tomb, the air thick with unseen menace. He was suddenly very cold, a bone-chilling cold that had nothing to do with the desert heat. He was not alone. He knew with a certainty that defied all logic that he was not alone. The old man's words echoed in David's ears long after he left the gas station. Her name was Sarah. The napkin, clutched tightly in his hand, felt like a lead weight, a tangible link to a tragedy he was only beginning to comprehend. He sat in his truck, the engine idling, the air conditioner struggling against the oppressive desert heat. He was torn between two conflicting impulses, the primal urge to flee, to put as much distance as possible between himself and this cursed place, and a burning desire to understand, to unravel the mystery of the vanished diner and the waitress who haunted its memory. He took a deep breath, the scent of dust and fear heavy in his lungs. He couldn't outrun this, couldn't ignore the chilling truth that had been thrust upon him. He pulled out his phone, his hand trembling slightly as he dialed 911. His voice, hoarse with emotion, recounted the impossible tale. The diner that wasn't there. The old man's story, the napkin with Sarah's handwriting. The dispatcher on the other end of the line listened patiently, her voice a calming presence in the face of his mounting terror. By the time he hung up, the wheels were already in motion, the gears of justice grinding slowly, inexorably towards the desolate stretch of highway where the Crossroads Diner once stood. The investigation was swift, thorough, and ultimately, frustratingly inconclusive. The empty lot yielded no secrets, the earth holding tight to its gruesome past. The old man, his memory clouded by time and grief, could offer no further details, only repeating his tale of the fire and the lost souls who lingered. Forensic specialists, their faces obscured by masks and their movements precise, combed the area for any trace of the diner or its occupants. They found nothing. No foundations, no charred timbers, no human remains. It was as if the Crossroads Diner had never existed, its presence erased from the face of the earth. Detectives, their eyes hardened by years of dealing with the worst humanity had to offer, listened to David's story with a mixture of skepticism and grudging respect. They had heard it all before, of course, the wild tales, the desperate attempts to explain away the unexplainable. But there was something about David, a sincerity in his eyes, a conviction in his voice that gave them pause. He wasn't crazy, they decided, just a man caught in the crosshairs of something he couldn't comprehend. The story of the vanished diner became a media sensation, the mystery capturing the public's imagination and fueling endless speculation. Was it a hoax, an elaborate prank designed to lure in unsuspecting travelers? Or was there something more sinister at play, a darkness lurking beneath the surface of the everyday world? Psychics and paranormal investigators descended upon the site, drawn to the story of Sarah and the lost souls who were said to wander the desolate stretch of highway. They spoke of cold spots, of disembodied voices whispering on the wind, of a lingering sadness that permeated the very air. Theories abounded, ranging from government conspiracies and secret experiments to interdimensional portals and time slips. But none of them could fully explain the mystery of the vanished diner, the lack of physical evidence, the haunting familiarity of Sarah's handwriting on that crumpled napkin. The empty lot remained, cordoned off by faded yellow tape, a silent testament to a mystery that defied explanation. the desert wind howled its mournful song, carrying with it the whispers of the past, the echoes of laughter and sorrow, of lives lived and lost. David returned to the site often, drawn back by an invisible force, a need to make sense of the senseless. He left flowers, a single red rose, a splash of color against the monotony of the desert landscape. He spoke to Sarah, his words carried away by the wind, hoping against hope that she could hear him, that she could find peace. He knew deep down that there would never be any answers, no closure, no satisfying resolution to this story. The Crossroads Diner would forever remain a ghost, a figment of memory and imagination, a chilling reminder that some mysteries are not meant to be solved. And yet, there were times when the wind whispered just right, that he could almost hear the soft jingle of a bell, the murmur of conversations, the faint scent of coffee and apple pie. And in those fleeting moments, he allowed himself to believe, just for a moment, that the Crossroads Diner was more than just a memory, that somewhere, in some unknown corner of the universe, it still stood, a beacon of warmth and welcome in the vast emptiness. He carried the memory of the Crossroads Diner with him, a bittersweet reminder of the kindness of strangers, the fragility of life, and the enduring power of belief. And he never ever passed a roadside diner without stopping, drawn in by the promise of warmth, the aroma of coffee, and the faint hope that he might, just might, see Sarah's familiar smile once more. The investigation into the Crossroads Diner yielded no answers, only more questions. How could a place so vividly remembered simply cease to exist? Was David a victim of his own mind, his perception warped by the solitude of the open road? Or had he stumbled upon something beyond the realm of human understanding, a tear in the fabric of reality itself? The napkin with Sarah's handwriting remained the only tangible piece of the puzzle, a haunting memento of a place perhaps never was. Experts analyzed the ink, the paper, searching for any sign of forgery, any indication that it was nothing more than a cruel trick. But the napkin, like the diner itself, refused to be categorized, defying all attempts to explain its existence. And so, the mystery lingered, fueled by the whispers of the wind and the unsettling possibility that some questions are not meant to be answered. Was David's experience to a parallel universe, a world existing alongside our own, separated by a veil so thin that it could be pierced by a chance encounter, a twist of fate? Or was it simply a cruel trick of the mind, a reminder of the profound connection and devastating loss? The story of the Crossroads Diner challenges our perception of reality, forcing us to confront the limits of our own understanding. What is real, and what is merely an illusion? Can our memories be trusted, or are they as fleeting and unreliable as the desert wind? The human mind, for all its complexity, is a fragile instrument susceptible to suggestion, prone to errors in judgment, and easily misled by external forces. We crave order, logic, a world that conforms to our expectations. But what happens when the familiar is stripped away? When the very foundations of our beliefs are shaken to their core? The Crossroads Diner, whether a figment of imagination, a supernatural encounter, or a chilling blend of both, serves as a stark reminder that there are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in our philosophy. It beckons us to explore the shadowy corners of our own minds, to question the nature of our existence, and to acknowledge that some truths are too profound, too unsettling to be fully grasped. And yet, amidst the uncertainty, the fear, the nagging sense that we are but travelers in a strange and often unforgiving land, there is a glimmer of hope. The human spirit, much like the flame of a candle, persists, seeking meaning, connection, and ultimately, a glimmer of light in the encroaching darkness. The Crossroads Diner, a place between memory and myth, vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving behind unanswered questions. Did it ever truly exist, or was it merely a phantom, a whisper in the wind, a cautionary tale? The answer remains elusive,